Hello folks, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about this super interesting news about the Lumix S1HII Mark II that Camera Zone brought out. I thought it is pretty wild, but it's really super interesting. Many things that it says. If the S1H will actually then be like this, then it's going to be an amazing camera. And yeah, so let's go through some or what Camera Zone said, that according to his informant, this is what it's going to have. So it's going to have basically a brand new sensor, so a 22.5 megapixel BSI CMOS sensor. So it's going to be a backside illuminated 22.5 sensor. We don't know if it's going to be stacked or how is it going to be, but it's going to have a different sensor than what we have seen previously from all the S-line up of cameras. So what does this mean? This means that it is going to have a pretty good low light capabilities because it's such kind of a small sensor. It's not maybe a 12 megapixel sensor, but it's more than 20. So that means it's going to deliver at least 6K oversampling or a 6K sensor, but we will get there pretty soon. But one of the coolest things that we have in this camera is what basically Canon already started with the C400, I believe it's called, and the C80, which is the triple native ISO. So currently in the S lineup of cameras, you have two native ISOs, which is 640 and 4000. But now what we have is basically going to be a middle range. So we're going to have 640, 250, and then 10,000 of ISO, of native ISOs. So this is really good because this will allow you to basically have a lower pass filter, or not lower pass filter, sorry. This will allow you to have a lower ISO range, which is kind of the base ISO range that all the S lineup have. But then they get rid of the 5000 and substitute it with the 2500, which I think it's a really good mid-range, because that's kind of what I think all the Blackmagic cameras, or at least one stop more anyway, the Blackmagic cameras have, but that's the range where the Blackmagic cameras are. And then you have a 10,000, and it's really good because that's where more or less Sony, the A7S3 sits at a 1250, so basically one stop more. So this is really good, and for especially a 20 plus megapixel camera, this is a really cool range. So chapeau for that, and it's really cool. And as I said in my previous video where I talked about most of the news, there is going to be, or it said that there is going to be a boost, a dynamic range boost. So according to Camera Zone, it will work until 6K, 80 frames per second, and then 4K up to 120 frames per second, and 1080p until 240 frames per second. So what this news is telling us is that we're going to have a 4K, 120 frames per second, and we are going to have an incrementation in 1080p, 200 frames per second. I hope with autofocus. But it's amazing. So that means we're going to have even a 6K with slow motion. We're going to talk about it soon about that, but apparently there's going to be a new phase detect autofocus. Probably it's going to be the version 2, because it says that it's going to have a super fast phase hybrid autofocus. So that's an amazing. That means Lumix collecting all that data from all the current S cameras and the GH newest cameras. It's collecting info to deliver a new phase detect autofocus. which will probably come with a new processor too, so we might not receive a firmware update in our current S lineup cameras, but who needs it? Because it's already pretty good, the AF, so I don't know if we really, maybe some little improvements, but I don't know if we really need a super boost or something like that in the AF, but every firmware update is quite a good welcome. And it's apparently is gonna have a ProRes RAW and ProRes RAW HQ internal recording as the GH7 has. And what I hope is that we will receive B-RAW internally too, because that's what I prefer, until Blackmagic will decide to collaborate with Apple and manage to let us record, let us edit ProRes RAW into their platform. I think it's something that they might be working on, since they have already been working with Apple on the Blackmagic app. So let's see and wait. One of the most exciting news is about the 17 stops of dynamic range that the sensor might have. But what is more exciting is that it might even come with the ARRI Log C4. The comes basically, it basically delivered, it was created when the ARRI 35 came out, because the Log C3 is basically was for the ARRI Mini and all the lineup before the ARRI 35. So it's quite good. It has a different curve from ARRI C3, and it looks beautiful, as all we have seen with the Alexa 35. So I'm looking forward to hear more about this, and I hope it's going to be true, but it's going to come with a cost for sure. But if all of the specs are true, please, Lumix, take my money, because this is just amazing. And to permit basically kind of many of these things to happen, because later we will speak more about the frame rates and all the other things that comes with all of this package of camera. There is going to be the first, I think, camera that ever has a dual fan inside the camera. So they're going to somehow fit in two types of ventilation in this camera to dissipate all the heat that this camera will have to manage because of all of these crazy specs that there are. And what I will guess is that they might have like a fan like the S5 Mark II and the Mark II X have on the top, and then still keep the fan on the back as the original S1HII has, or the the GH7 and the GH6 have. So that will be like one on top where you have the EVF, and then one on the back where you have the LCD. That would be pretty sick, because what I'm about to say now are basically all the frame rates and things that this camera is able to do. So let's go straight into it, so you understand why this fan technology that this says that they are going to do. And it says that there is going to be a 60 frames per second boost shooting with AF and pre-capture. So this is mostly for photographers. So that's pretty cool. You're gonna have 60 frames per second with AF and pre-capture. I hope this could be even in RAW. We don't know, we will see. But now let's go into video. You're gonna have full frame open gate 6K up to 120 frames per second. Did you hear? Open gate 6K full frame up to 100 frames per second. That's insane. So that dual fan is going to be for sure needed. Then there is going to be basically 16 by 9, 160 frames per second. There's going to be a 4K up to 240 frames per second. Then 1080p up to 480 frames per second. Then you're gonna have basically all the Super 35 modes. So, but there is like a new Super 35 mode here, because here there is apparently a 6x5. But then still on the crop, there is going to be basically a 4K up to 200 frames per second and 1080p up to 480 frames per second. So apparently all the 4K modes that I said before the Super 35 crop sensors, basically apparently all of these are going to be oversampled, which I doubt that a 1080p up to 480 is going to be oversampled. I will show on the screen what I mean, that it seems that it's going to be oversampled just because of how they wrote it here, but it is what it is. And then apparently there's going to be a HEVC 10-bit 444 intra plus long up. Then you're going to have an AVC 10-bit 422 intra long up codecs at all resolutions. Damn. And then there is going to be a new back panel. No, kidding. The EVF is going to basically be what Sony and Canon has delivered in their newest cameras and high-end cameras, which is the 9.45 million dots ultra bright. But they're going to borrow basically what I think Nikon did, but Nikon didn't have this high of an EVF dots, which they're going to deliver with 4,000 nits at 120 frames per second. This is not wild, it's more than wild. So this is pretty much what the news says. How long is this video? Damn. This is what basically Camera Raw basically saying, that his source is basically telling him, or I don't know where he found this, but these are pretty interesting. But what I keep not hearing is about this internal ND filter system that I heard about like a year ago. I really hope that Lumix will actually deliver a mirrorless camera with this system inside, because that will be probably the best camera. Because already from what I'm seeing here, this is going to be like a beast camera, or even if this is a false news, we know that the S1HII Mark II is going to be a beast of a camera no matter what. But then with an ND filter system inside and still manage to keep it like, you know, compact, I think they are going to basically beat the market by still keeping it, you know, at a reasonable price, you know, between that let's say 3,500 to 4,000, you know, basically 3,500 euros to 4,500 euros mark. I think they will steal the market to a lot of the current, you know, Sony, Canon users, because yeah, like the S1HII original one has really this close to really be probably one of the best mirrorless cameras ever created, but it didn't have autofocus, and it has a little bit of a quirks here and there that stopped it from selling more than how much it could actually sell, because it's an amazing and phenomenal camera. I used it, I shot with it, so I know how amazing that camera is. But hey, write me down below in the comment, tell me what do you think about these specs, if they are too wild to be true, or what are the things that you wish they were included, you know, in this specific specs here. And if you think that these specs are really true, are you going to actually buy it? And what is the price that you think this type of a camera will actually cost? That would be interesting to know. Let's have a chat down below, guys. Take good care of yourself, and I'm gonna see you in the next one.